So here we are. Yeah, beginning the second talk in this series about emergence as a therapy, specifically about talk therapy, but therapy in general. And in the first talk, which was admittedly rather broad and perhaps somewhat unorganized, I tried to give you some starting points from which to think about the differences between emergence therapies and all other therapies. And these include both talk therapies, different experiential therapies, and medical therapies. So hopefully the takeaway was that the most important two that are one here is the idea of dividing all of the things which alter a person. Mostly in therapy, people come there to reduce their symptoms, so that's in the group. But all things, making some therapies make becoming more aware, self-aware. One of the key things, emergence definitely does that. And some therapies call it personal growth or self-realization. Many, many words for this, right? But the thing that I tried to get across is that all of those things, whatever the therapy accomplishes, whatever large or small changes that occur, all of those changes can be divided into either changes that are temporary and changes that are permanent. And there is value in both, so please do not hear me saying that it is not worth making temporary changes. Do not hear that. But it is worth making temporary changes only when they lead or allow the possibility for permanent changes. Everything else is really, a misunderstanding of what it means to do therapy or to have personal growth or to become more self-aware. Okay, so then that two that are one, like all things in emergence, it has a way to be measured. A way to be measured, which is simple, and it only employs a very obvious, in the real world thing, the presence of willpower in the situations where the person is different. So, if the person is a person who is trying to be more mindful of their angry outbursts, we mentioned this a little bit in the previous talk, and the person finds themselves in situations which provoke that reaction in them, and then they have to remind themselves, I don't really want to lose control here, I don't want to feel the guilt I feel afterwards, I don't want to hurt the other person. That should be a big one. If the person has to remind themselves of that, if a therapist even tells them, remember when you're in this situation, remind yourself, and then if they, in that situation, expect you that this will help you, they expect that this will help you, and the test then becomes, how much willpower do you have to use to affect that kind of a change? How much willpower do you have to do to, first of all, to even bring to mind that you should be thinking about it? And then the willpower to continue to behave in a way that follows what you would like to be. If the change requires willpower to that degree, your nature is unchanged. So, and the opposite, what permanent change? Well, I remember having a reaction to people telling me what to do, but specifically in and around the eating. and don't talk with your mouth full, or slow down, you're going to burn your tongue, or, these kinds of things that parents say to young children. My dinner table was pretty unsafe, and my mom was, even though I love her more now than ever, my mother was a frightening person to me when I was young. She had schizophrenia and could be very violent. And so those things, often when she said them, I heard them like, Moses talking from the mountain. You better do this or else, So I have a time where a woman was coming to me in the early 90s, and I was in my little office, rental space, and I had, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes between sessions, and I had gone to the deli to get chicken soup. They used to make this awesome, everyday fresh chicken soup, and anyway, I had my door open, and it was about, I don't know, a few minutes before it was time for her to come in, and I am trying to wolf down this really hot soup, and I hear her, she's standing, this woman is standing in the doorway, and she's saying, slow down, you'll burn your tongue. Now, why do I even mention that? What's the big deal? It's logical or whatever, and so on, and somebody could just say I was being immature or a jerk or whatever if I had a reaction. But all of my life, I would have had the reaction of anger at that. Very angry. It just is. I mean, even not try and go there. It's something left over from childhood, and I'd get very angry. And but on that day, and with my relationship with this particular woman who was similar to my age, I was in my early 40s then, so was she. And she was just a very warm, Mediterranean, Jewish woman, motherly, kind, whatever. And you know what? I, to this day, can hear the kindness and the melody, actually, in the sentence that she said to me. Do you know, if somebody says to me now, I'm eating, and they say to me, don't hurry, you'll burn your tongue. Do you know I involuntarily smiled? Now, listen to the word. Involuntarily smile. I don't just smile. I'm not trying. I don't think about something. I am reliving that moment, which was the first in my then 40-something years, in which I had heard the kindness in what had been a kind statement all those years, but I never heard the kindness in it. I couldn't see it. I had been startled by those words and never heard the kindness, never thought to look at the person's face, nothing. And it had made me angry every time. So, do I get angry when that happens now? Actually, I feel loved. No willpower. My nature changed that day. Did I do that purposely? No, life did that for me. But I was beginning at that point in my life to question all of this stuff about what is the nature of therapy. What are we supposed to do in that room? You see, I came to be a therapist in the same way that every other person at that time and in schools now comes to being a therapist, with the belief that the wound itself is the symptoms. And when you get rid of the symptoms, and you add to that, and when you understand the painful events in your life, you're healed. Yeah, that's a total crock. You're not healed because you understand the things. You could be the greatest professor teaching all these things about, for instance, being molested as a child. You could know a lot about it statistically or whatever. You could have identified a lot of your own feelings. You could have done a lot of work. But I'm going to say something right now that's very controversial. If you do not, without effort, without thinking, if you do not automatically feel empathy for the person who molested you, without losing the empathy for yourself, empathy really is a bridge between two people with common suffering, so both people are in the emergence definition of it. But if you cannot feel some degree of empathy, then you haven't healed that. I didn't even intend to talk about this, but it's here. So when I was 15, a boy in the neighborhood asked if I wanted to come work to put shingles on a roof of a building on his aunt's house, which was on Staten Island. And you can tell from my body language that this is difficult for me to talk about. I'm going to set aside the details and just simply say that that boy drugged me and raped me. And the pain that I'm feeling right now, without effort, it's not just about that event at all. As a therapist, it's helped me to sit with several hundred people who have also had those kinds of childhoods. For me, that was one of several events like that in my childhood, not all from that same person. But with other people, it doesn't take much. If you're a very young child, I have seen people who had this kind of thing happen at 3 years old, and oh God, it just poisons so much of their life and their ability to trust and so on. And if you are in this category, you know what I am talking about. A process in therapy is coming to accept that the thing happened, and part of that process is getting angry that it happened. That's really accurate, though. You must get angry about that it happened. Many therapies stop there. You are not hearing me use the F word here. And if you think it's 4 letters, no, that's not what I'm saying. The F word is forgiveness. You're not hearing me say that word, because you see, that's an idea. What I'm talking about is permanent change and an evidence. What is the evidence? An evidence is that without effort. When I think of that boy, his name was Nick. When I think of that boy now, you can tell, if you look at my eyes, I'm welling up. Well, why? It's not easy to put into words. I know that he was molested by an older boy when he was 12. Is that a license to hurt another boy? No, it's not. So please don't hear that. So how did this change for me? It's certainly not intellectual, let me tell you. There's no logic in the world that says that was okay, because it wasn't. And there's no logic that says, well, because he was hurt, he gets to hurt me and it's not his fault. Well, it's not his fault, but he is responsible. Quite honestly, if I think about if he was watching this talk right now, and if he was hearing this, and if he knew that who I was talking about, I would hope that he would be sobbing right now. As a punishment? No. No. I feel like sobbing right now. And I would feel less alone if he was sobbing right now. It's a strange way to look at things, I know. So how did it change? It certainly didn't change with me knowing Emergence. This was something that changed in my early 20s. And I was going to a doctor's office, my family doctor, and I was there with my wife and my 2 very young children then, and I was sitting in the waiting room. I believe that day we were there for my wife, and tiny waiting room. It was in a White House, when doctors actually had offices in their homes a long time ago. And through the door that led to the doctor's actual examination rooms, through that door 2 men came through, also in their 20s. And one of those two men was Nick. I had such rage I cannot describe it. And I looked at him, and I will never forget his face when he looked at me. I can see him looking down and to the right, looking at the floor. I could feel him shrink. Somebody might say, well, he was afraid of me because that he was afraid of me. And truthfully, perhaps. But when I picture what's there, and remember what I've been telling you about picturing, you can't change what you can't see. You see, on that day, that was the first time I could see him, and I could see him as a human being. I could see him as somebody who was affected by me. Often when people are hurt by others, one of the most missing pieces of it is that they cannot picture the other person being affected by their suffering. But I could that day. So in what couldn't have been any more than 3 to 5 seconds, I relived the anger of knowing what had happened to me. And that was the onset, and the 3 to 5 seconds later, my whole life had changed permanently. Because without effort, including right now, all these years later, more than 50 years later, it hasn't deadened. You can tell I'm feeling every bit of this, but that includes empathy for Nick. I'm having to hold back tears, and that's making an effort. And I'm doing that by choice because I don't want to lose my focus and make this all about me. Because it is about you, and it's about me using my life and my discoveries to help you to make the world a better place for others. So right now it is not about me, it's about you. And it is about this idea that therapy should be a process which begins with temporary change and leads to permanent change. And the measure of which part you're in as a therapist is, does the client, does the person sitting with you, does your friend, does that person have to use willpower to affect the change that he or she wants to make? Or does it immediately evoke love? Immediately. Empathy, compassion. That's the only test. And when I look at it and I say it in a small way or a more succinct way, I say, when I'm in that situation, does my reaction pleasantly surprise me? If it does, you have permanently changed some of what has happened to you in that situation. Permanently changed. And the first time that you have an emergence, well, this is what we're going to talk about in the next talk. What actually happens when you heal? And what does the word healing mean? Well, I can tell you right now, it doesn't mean all the symptoms go away. But what I can tell you right now is that what I've said so far is the test for whether healing has begun. Healing, not just feeling hopeful. Healing, permanent change. And what is the test? Pleasant surprise when you expect to feel emptiness or pain. Pleasant surprise. I was pleasantly surprised that day when I looked at Nick's face and I saw that he was reacting to me and he was suffering. That 3 to 5 seconds changed my entire life for more than 50 years now. And it can change yours. But more importantly, if you use Emergence as a therapy, you can change the lives of so many people. And if they're permanent changes, if they have emergences, then they change the lives of all the people that they touch, just as I'm trying to change yours. Because when you feel love, you want to give it to others. That's part of what love is. Hopefully I've given you a little of mine today. And hopefully this has been amazingly brief for me, but also something that you can take away and use in your life to change other lives as well.